Harold Jacobs grew up in a cold, unwelcoming household. His mother, Brenda, was distant, while his stepfather, Trevor, provided the only warmth in his life. Trevor, a kind-hearted trucker, treated Harold as his own son, despite not being his biological father. Brenda, however, resented Harold, seeing him as a reminder of her past failures. This environment shaped Harold into a man determined to create a family that would never feel the coldness he experienced as a child. Despite his mother's emotional distance, Harold found comfort in Trevor's guidance, who taught him the values of hard work, respect, and love, principles that Harold held dear as he grew up. In high school, Harold met Sandra, whom he believed would help him build the loving family he always wanted. They married young after Sandra became pregnant with their daughter, Rebecca. Harold joined the Army, then transitioned to a security career, all to provide the best life for his family. But the foundation of love and trust he worked so hard to build wasn't as strong as he had hoped. Harold never saw himself as extraordinary. His job as a security officer often involved enforcing rules, dealing with unruly individuals, and handling the associated paperwork. Despite the challenges, Harold found satisfaction in his work and took pride in supporting his family. His wife, Sandra, a beautiful woman with youthful looks, worked at a local bank, eventually becoming a bank manager after attending community college. Together, they provided a stable life for their daughter, Rebecca. Harold and Sandra were both 18 when Rebecca was born. With help from their families, they managed to care for Rebecca, eventually moving into their own home. Harold joined the Army after high school, serving 4 years before landing a security job with an armored truck service. Over time, he worked his way up to become the regional director for a large, world-renowned security company in the Northeast. Meanwhile, Sandra's career at the bank brought additional financial stability to the family. Rebecca, now 17, was once the center of Harold's world, but their relationship grew strained as she got older. Since turning 12, Rebecca had become increasingly rude to Harold, a change that deeply hurt him. He chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion, but it felt different. One incident that stood out was when Rebecca was 12 and Harold asked her to go to bed. She responded with a defiant, "Why should I?" Another time, at 14, she publicly embarrassed him by yelling, "The only embarrassing thing is being around you," when he asked her to change a revealing outfit at a block party. Her sweet 16 was particularly memorable for Harold. He worked tirelessly, pulling triple shifts and working back-to-back 17-day stretches to save up for a down payment on a used 2014 Chevy Impala for her birthday. Despite all his effort, Rebecca's reaction was dismissive. "Gee, thanks, I guess, Dad." Harold was hurt by her ingratitude, and though he managed to hold back his anger, the memory lingered. Later, Rebecca allowed a boyfriend to drive the car, which ended in a crash that totaled it. Though Harold was relieved she was unharmed, seeing the wrecked car brought him to tears, as all his hard work seemed wasted. Harold often found himself alone in disciplining their daughter, Rebecca, as his wife, Sandra, never supported him. She would only intervene to excuse Rebecca's behavior and criticize Harold. After a long day of work, Harold was heading home, but he found some comfort in knowing he had saved up to surprise Sandra with a trip to Jamaica for their anniversary. They had planned this trip for years, but never found the time. Harold loved his wife deeply and looked forward to surprising her. Driving home in his 2024 Chevrolet Camaro, Harold reminisced about how he, Sandra, and his friend would debate whether Ford or Dodge was better. Despite the challenges, he loved his wife and daughter and cherished his family. As he approached his house, he reflected on the struggles he'd faced, but felt grateful for his family. When he walked in, he saw Rebecca coming down the stairs in a revealing outfit. Concerned, he asked, "Where are you going dressed like that?" Rebecca, rolling her eyes, replied, "Going to the movies and then a house party in Lafayette, I told you." Harold, ignoring her attitude, responded, "You didn't mention a house party. If you had, I would have said no. And there's no way I'm letting you go out dressed like that. You're grounded." Rebecca was outraged. "Grounded? For what? My clothes?" Harold calmly explained, "It's not just the clothes. You're grounded because you're failing math despite my warnings. And for skipping school to hang out with friends. That's why." Rebecca's anger boiled over and she spat, "You pathetic excuse of a man. Mom and I should have left you years ago." Without thinking, Harold backhanded Rebecca, sending her onto the couch. Shocked by his own action, he stared at her with a cold intensity. He then spoke firmly, "If you live under my roof, you follow my rules. I won't tolerate disrespect in my home. Do you understand?" Terrified, Rebecca nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. You're grounded for 3 weeks. Now go to your room." Afterward, Harold went to the fridge for a beer, bracing himself for the argument he knew would come with Sandra. After finishing his drink, he knocked on Rebecca's door. Hearing her small voice, he entered and saw she had been crying. Despite everything, she was still his daughter, and he loved her. "Honey, I'm sorry I slapped you. It shouldn't have happened. But when you called me a loser, something in me snapped. I love you, but I won't be disrespected in my own home. If something is bothering you, we need to talk about it. I'll always love you." Rebecca, though still upset, didn't respond. Harold kissed her forehead and left the room. An hour later, Sandra sped into the driveway, furious. The moment she walked in, she demanded, "Who the hell do you think you are, slapping our baby like that, Harold?" Harold remained calm but firm. "Good evening, honey. Welcome home. How was work today?" I asked because you skipped greeting me, as you often do lately. To answer your question, I'm her father, and while I love our daughter, I won't tolerate disrespect in the home I provide for our family. Sandra's eyes narrowed, irritated by Harold's firm stance. She took a breath and asked, "Sandra called me at work and said you slapped her. Is that true?" Harold read her expression before replying, "Yes, I did. I slapped her hard enough that she landed on the couch. She needed to understand that her behavior is unacceptable." Sandra was shocked, covering her mouth in disbelief. "So, you're just going to slap our daughter around when she talks back?" Harold's anger grew, though he remained calm. "No, but I will discipline her when she disrespects us. Did she tell you why I slapped her? Or did you just take her word for it?" Sandra looked down, unable to respond. Harold continued, "She was dressed inappropriately for a party she never mentioned, and has been skipping school all week. Did you know that? The principal called me today, but you didn't check the missed calls or texts, did you?" Sandra admitted quietly. "No, I didn't." "At least you admitted that. But that's not why I slapped her. I did it because she called me a stupid, pathetic excuse of a man and said you both should have left me years ago." Sandra was stunned. "She said that to you?" "Yes, our daughter said that to my face. This isn't the first time she's disrespected me, and you've always been there to shield her from the consequences. I'm not perfect, but I work hard for this family. I wake up at 4 a.m., work 60 hours a week, and handle endless complaints, contracts, and clients. Yet, I still make time for every school event, every game, and I help with her homework. But when I discipline her for crossing a line, I'm the bad guy?" Sandra was speechless, seeing the pain and anger in Harold's eyes as he spoke. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm going for a drive. I need to clear my head." He left, leaving Sandra stunned in the living room. Harold drove aimlessly, needing to escape. He felt like an ATM or doormat to his family, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Suddenly, his phone rang. Expecting it to be Sandra or Rebecca, he saw it was his mother. He answered, only to be met with her angry voice. "What in the hell is wrong with you?" "Hi, Mom." "Don't hi, Mom, me. Sandra and Rebecca just called. They said you struck Rebecca and cursed out Sandra. Have you lost your mind?" "No, Mom. Just my patience." With that, Harold hung up. Harold loved his mother to a point, but their relationship was strained. Brenda Logan had always been cold, never showing him love or compassion. His father abandoned them when Harold was born, and Brenda made it clear that she believed Harold was no good, just like his father. There was no nurturing bond between them, and she never hesitated to remind him of her low opinion of him. Harold's life changed when his mother met Trevor Jacobs when Harold was 1. Trevor was a beacon of love for both Harold and Brenda. Trevor treated Harold as his own, teaching him life lessons, and even defending him when Brenda was too harsh. Although Brenda never showed Harold much love, the misuse eventually stopped, and they merely tolerated each other. Trevor loved Harold so much that Harold took his last name. After Brenda and Trevor married, they had a son, Adam, who became the golden child in Brenda's eyes. Adam often used Harold to get out of trouble and took everything from him: friends, allowance, and affection. Only Trevor treated both boys equally, loving and disciplining them fairly. Harold eventually grew distant, speaking mainly to Trevor. When Harold's daughter Rebecca was born, Trevor was the only family member who supported both Harold and Sandra. Adam even tried to flirt with Sandra when Harold wasn't around, but Trevor put a stop to it until his end of life. Trevor's will surprised everyone, splitting $500,000 equally between Harold and Adam when they turned 24. Adam resented Harold for this, feeling entitled to the entire fortune because he was the biological son. Harold used his share to buy a house for his family after leaving the military. Returning to the present, Harold knew he had to go home. After watching the sunset at an old drive-in, he headed back. When he arrived, Sandra was waiting. She apologized for not considering his feelings about Rebecca and admitted she often sided with their daughter, making Harold look like the bad guy. Harold smiled. "That's all I ask, honey. I love you and Rebecca. You are my world. Just have my back and give me the respect I give you." Sandra responded, "I love you too, Harold." They kissed, and Harold pulled out 2 first-class tickets to Jamaica, revealing his surprise anniversary trip. Overjoyed, Sandra jumped into his arms, kissing him nonstop. In the days that followed, things improved in the Jacobs household. Sandra stopped undermining Harold and respected his role as the head of the family. Although Rebecca still wasn't speaking much to Harold, her attitude improved. She stopped skipping school, and her grades began to recover. Even Harold's mother eased up on her nagging calls. Harold noticed his brother Adam visiting more often, which seemed to lift Rebecca's spirits, but otherwise, things were going well. One day, while cleaning the house before their trip, Harold and Sandra were organizing the garage and attic. Rebecca was upset about being left out of the trip, but kept her feelings to herself after their recent conflict. Harold, working in the attic, came across old photo albums, sparking nostalgia as he looked through childhood photos, wedding pictures, and memories of Rebecca growing up. Just as he was about to put the photos away, he found a plastic bag containing a bundle of letters and a large brown envelope. As he read the contents, his heart sank, and his world shattered. The letter Harold found shattered him. "My dearest love, Adam. Last night was magical. I've never felt anything like it. Your touch is like an artist creating a masterpiece. Nothing compared to Harold. I just want you in my arms. Yours always, Sandra." Harold was devastated, realizing Sandra loved Adam. "I've been married to her for over 20 years and she does this to me," he whispered, his world crumbling. He found more letters from Adam expressing love for Sandra and hinting at their affair, even mentioning that Rebecca had Sandra's eyes. Then Harold discovered a DNA test proving Rebecca wasn't his biological daughter. He felt betrayed and numb, wondering if his entire family knew the truth. Harold decided he needed proof. He took a hair sample from Rebecca's comb for a DNA test, determined to uncover the full truth. He gathered himself, suppressing his rage, and planned his next steps. When he left the attic, he ran into Sandra, who asked where he was going. Harold controlled his anger and calmly lied, saying he needed supplies for the attic and would pick up dinner. Once out of the house, Harold called Marcus Dwight, a trusted private investigator who worked for his company. Marcus was a former police officer who had left the force after a near-fatal ambush, dedicating his skills to private investigations instead. When Harold arrived at the office, Marcus immediately sensed something was wrong. Harold broke down, explaining everything. Marcus, who had a personal connection to a similar situation, was furious. He remembered a friend who had discovered his daughter wasn't his and lost everything in the fallout, leading to a tragic courtroom incident. Seeing Harold in such pain brought back those memories, and Marcus took the situation personally, determined to help Harold get to the bottom of it. Harold, wiping his tears, stood up. "First, I need to confirm if Rebecca is my daughter." He pulled out a bag with her hair. "Depending on the results, we'll decide what to do next. Second, I want to destroy them, not illegally, but in a way that makes them feel the pain and humiliation I'm experiencing." Marcus smiled. "Let's get to work." He showed Harold a room full of surveillance equipment. "This is all legal, as long as it's used on your property or devices in your name. I'll need your permission to install everything." Harold agreed, signing the paperwork. "I'll get the cameras in place when no one else is home. You don't need to know where they are. Just trust me. They'll capture everything. I respect what you do, Harold, and I understand your pain." Feeling supported, Harold nodded. Marcus also gave him the address of a DNA testing lab nearby, suggesting he could drop off the sample that day. Determined, Harold agreed. "Let's get this started." After leaving Marcus's office, Harold called his lawyer and best friend, Charles Darwin. "Charles, I need to see you. Something serious has happened." "Meet me at my office in an hour," Charles replied. When Harold arrived, Charles was shocked by his friend's appearance. "What happened, Harold? Is Sandra and Rebecca okay?" Harold broke down, recounting the day's events. Charles was furious on Harold's behalf. "They won't get away with this. Legally, you can monitor anything on your property or devices in your name. We'll access any deleted files and use everything you've gathered. The law is on your side if we prove infidelity, especially with the new state laws protecting the assets of the cheated party." Seeing his friend's despair, Charles added, "I can't imagine what you're going through, but you need to protect yourself now." Harold, heartbroken, said, "I loved her for over 17 years, and now it all means nothing. My own daughter, who might not even be mine, despises me, and my wife cheated with my brother, who hates me just for existing." Charles, moved by Harold's pain, assured him, "We'll set things right. You stood by me when I needed help, and I'll do the same for you." The two friends embraced. As Harold drove home with the supplies, he reflected on the betrayal and pain he endured that day. He was determined to keep his knowledge of the affair hidden until he had all the facts. The thought of Rebecca not being his daughter tormented him, but he braced himself for the DNA results, dreading what they might reveal. When Harold arrived home, everything seemed normal, despite his contempt. He kissed his wife to avoid raising suspicion. They finished cleaning the house and had dinner together, but Harold felt like he was living in a sitcom, surrounded by actors instead of his real family. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Harold installed the hacking equipment on Sandra's and Rebecca's phones, following Marcus's instructions. He texted Marcus to confirm it was done, and within minutes, Marcus responded, indicating the hacking had begun. By the end of the week, Harold would have the information he needed, whether he wanted it or not. The next day, after Rebecca went to school and Sandra to work, Harold decided he needed a new outlet. He couldn't just sit around feeling broken. Remembering his childhood love of comic books, he searched for a comic book shop and found one called The Mischievous Pin. Stepping inside, memories of his childhood flooded back. Days spent with a friend, escaping life's troubles through comics and anime. That friend, however, had been lost to him for years, bringing a wave of sadness. At the cashier, Harold was stunned to see someone he never expected, Rose. Her eyes widened with recognition, and she greeted him with a huge smile. "Harold, it's been ages!" She hugged him tightly. It was the first time Harold had genuinely smiled since his ordeal began. Rose had come into Harold's life when he was a child, during a tough time. On a Parents' Day, when his mother dismissed him harshly, he had run off to cry under a tree. Rose, a girl with red hair and blue eyes, approached him, offering kindness and inviting him to join her family's picnic. That simple gesture sparked a deep friendship that grew into love by the time they were in high school. However, Harold's brother Adam, who had a history of taking things from Harold, wanted Rose for himself. When she rejected Adam's advances and defended herself against him, it led to a series of events that forced Rose and her family to move away to avoid legal trouble. Rose had apologized for the chaos, but Harold had reassured her that she had done nothing wrong, blaming himself instead. In the park where they first met, they had held each other, expressing their love, even though life had torn them apart. Seeing Rose again brought back all those memories for Harold, reminding him of a simpler, happier time. Harold and Rose had always planned to wait until they were 18, at prom, for their first time together to make it special. Over the years, their love and friendship grew stronger. But when the day of Rose's move came, it felt like a part of them died. Harold, driven by Trevor, gave Rose one last hug before watching her leave, knowing they might never see each other again. As the years passed, Harold met and married Sandra, building a family with her. Now, after all these years, he found himself reunited with Rose. "Harold, I can't believe it's been so long," Rose said, tears in her eyes. Despite the years, she had grown into a beautiful woman, looking youthful at 33. With her short red hair, blue eyes, and geeky tattoos, she still carried the charm that had captivated Harold. "Rose, you look amazing," Harold replied, making her blush. They decided to catch up during Rose's break, heading to a cozy break room in the comic shop she owned. Harold was surprised and impressed. "You own this place? How did that happen?" Rose explained that after her parents died in a car accident, she discovered they had a life insurance policy and a trust from her grandparents, totaling $2 million. With her love for comics and a business background, she returned to town, bought the property, and turned it into her dream comic shop, living on the top floor. Harold was proud of her success. "You deserve this, Rose. I bet your guy is the luckiest in the world." Rose's smile faded. "He's out of the picture. I caught him cheating, and he even had the nerve to be angry when I interrupted him. Thankfully, we didn't have kids, and I got out before things got worse." Harold, relating to her pain, shared what had happened to him recently. Rose hugged him tightly. "I'm here for you, whatever happens." Harold felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. As they parted, Rose invited him to visit again. "I'd like that," Harold said before driving off. On his way home, Harold received a text from Marcus. "Meet me at Charles's." Harold knew what this meant, and despite dreading what was to come, headed there. Upon arrival, Charles's wife, Linda, greeted him warmly. "Harold, I'm so sorry about everything. We're here for you no matter what." Harold hugged Linda and thanked her before heading into the office, where Marcus and Charles awaited him with grim expressions. Marcus began, "Harold, I'm sorry, but it's bad. We found more texts and videos. They've been having an on-and-off affair since Rebecca was born. And there's more. The DNA test confirmed you're not Rebecca's father." Harold, overwhelmed with pain and humiliation, broke down. Marcus offered him a sip from his flask to steady him, then continued, "We also discovered that your mother and Rebecca knew about the affair since Rebecca was 12, around the time you noticed a change." Harold's heart broke as he read the documents. Chats between Rebecca and his mother expressing their hatred for him, their enjoyment of living off him, and plans to divorce him after Rebecca graduated. They even discussed moving Adam into the house Harold paid for, and how his mother wished he had died instead of Trevor. In shock, Harold muttered, "How could my own family hate me so much?" Charles and Linda offered comfort, with Linda reminding him, "Family isn't about blood. It's about actions. You saved Charles and me years ago, and you've been our family ever since. We love you, and we'll always be here for you." Harold, resolved, told Charles, "We go scorched earth." Charles nodded. "How do you want the paperwork sent?" Harold decided. "I'll deliver it to Sandra myself. She's expecting a surprise, and she'll get one when she and Rebecca come home. I used to love my daughter, but now I can't even stand to hear her name." Charles agreed, asking about Adam. "I want him to get some bad news while he's at work," Harold replied. Charles smiled at the plan. "Consider it done." Harold then added, "I want something special for my mother. I'll deliver the divorce papers myself during Rebecca's party in front of everyone. I want them all to see that Adam isn't the golden child they thought he was." Charles, initially surprised, supported the idea. "I'm on board." Harold maintained his composure, planning to keep up appearances until their anniversary trip. "I'll confront Sandra then and decide what to do after." Everyone agreed, and Linda reminded him, "We love you and are here for you." On the day of the trip, Harold maintained the facade. The night before, Sandra initiated closeness, and Harold responded with aggression, treating her without affection. Afterward, Sandra, satisfied but shocked, asked, "What's gotten into you?" Harold coldly replied, "Just something I needed to get out of my system." As they prepared to leave, Adam and their mother Janet arrived. Adam smirked, making a comment about Rebecca that nearly drove Harold to violence, especially when Adam hugged Sandra inappropriately. Harold restrained himself, knowing he needed to keep the element of surprise. He avoided his mother, knowing any interaction might raise suspicion. After loading the Camaro, they headed to the airport. As Harold gazed out at the island below, hearing the captain announce their landing, he thought about how he would confront Sandra and whether she would be honest with him. He planned to maintain the facade of a loving husband until then, hoping she would at least tell him the truth. The resort, called the Hidden Treasure, was stunning, with beautiful views, luxurious amenities, and perfect settings for couples. Knowing this trip marked the end of his marriage, Harold decided to make the most of it. He and Sandra enjoyed their time, exploring trails, beaches, and nightclubs. On the second night, Sandra seemed happier than ever, and though Harold didn't love her anymore, he decided to be with her one last time. He used her for his own pleasure, feeling nothing, and resolved that it would be the last time. The next morning, Harold woke up and gently nudged Sandra awake. They cleaned up and went to breakfast. As they ate, Sandra said, "Harold, this trip has been amazing. I love you. And when we get home, things will be different." Harold calmly responded, "Sandra, on that we agree." He then pulled out a bundle from a Ziploc bag and placed it on the table. Sandra's face turned white. "Where did you find these?" "In the attic, the day after you said you loved me," Harold replied. Sandra, realizing her nearly 20-year marriage was falling apart, began to cry. I can explain. It was a mistake." Harold laughed bitterly. "A mistake? Forgetting something at home is a mistake. Cheating and having your husband raise another man's child is a choice. At least own up to it." Through her tears, Sandra explained, "It started a year after we began dating. We had an argument and I was upset. Adam came over, comforted me, and we ended up having sex. It was supposed to be just once, but it continued on and off for years. I never meant to hurt you, Harold. I love you." "No, don't say that. You lost the right to use that word with me. Love requires loyalty and respect, which you clearly lack." Sandra cried harder, knowing she deserved his anger. Harold continued, "I saw the DNA test. I know Rebecca isn't mine." Sandra gasped, and Harold continued, his voice harsh. So not only did you betray me with my brother, but you made me raise his child, who treated me like dirt. Who is her father? Harold already knew the answer, but wanted to see if Sandra had any dignity left to be honest with him. Despite everything, a part of him still loved her, but he couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. Harold asked, his voice cold and demanding, "What is his name, Sandra?" Sandra hesitated before replying, I can't tell you. I'm sorry." Harold didn't respond, just stared at her with a blank expression. He put money down for their drinks, canceled the meal, and walked away without a word. Sandra ran after him, but he ignored her. Back at the hotel, Harold started packing without speaking to her. Realizing he was done with her, Sandra packed as well. Harold caught an earlier flight, leaving Sandra to arrive home 2 hours later. When Harold got home, he found Adam waiting with a smug grin. Before Adam could speak, Harold confronted him. "I know everything about you and Sandra. Get out of my house before I smash your face into my coffee table." Terrified, Adam left immediately. Harold then moved his belongings from the master bedroom to the basement, which he had previously set up as a guest apartment. Sandra watched, realizing too late that her actions had likely ended their marriage. The next day, Harold met with Marcus, Charles, and Linda to discuss the trip and his next steps. He instructed them to prepare everything for Rebecca's 18th birthday party at the Grand Lion Hotel. Marcus would serve as Harold's personal security that night. Marcus revealed more dirt on Adam, including sexual maltreatment claims and shady business practices. He assured Harold that the women were ready to testify against Adam. Impressed, Harold suggested a promotion for Marcus, which brought some lightness to the meeting. But as Harold left, his resolve hardened. He was done shedding tears. Now he had a purpose. Knowing Rebecca was out with his mother and Adam, Harold waited for their return, sitting in the living room with a glass of brandy. When Rebecca arrived, she sneered, "Finally, I can leave that loser in this dump." Sandra tried to correct her. "That loser loves you and raised you. Show some respect." Rebecca rolled her eyes and replied, "Oh, please. You've been with my real dad since I was born. It's too late for respect. That loser kept me from Ronnie, and I hate him for it." From the shadows, Harold spoke up. "Rebecca, why don't you tell me how you really feel?" Both women froze in terror as they realized Harold had heard everything. Rebecca shrank, realizing her cruel words had been overheard by the very man she had just insulted. "Harold, it's not what you think," Sandra tried to explain. "She just misspoke." "No, she said exactly what she meant," Harold replied, stepping closer. The women huddled together as he continued. "I know everything, Sandra. I know Rebecca isn't my daughter but Adam's. I know my mother knew about the affair since Rebecca was 12. You told Rebecca I was having an affair and that Adam was comforting you, all to cover up your own shame." Harold turned to Rebecca. "I don't know what I did to make you hate me, Rebecca. I loved you with all my heart. I was there for you when Tommy broke up with you, when you were sick, when you started school. I promised to protect you and show you love, unlike what I experienced from my mother." Rebecca began to cry as he continued. "When you were in that car accident, all I cared about was getting to you, hoping you weren't hurt." Harold then looked at Sandra. "And you, my love? Did you and Adam laugh every time you took him to our bed?" Sandra went pale. "Before you ask, I have video evidence," Harold said, turning on the TV to show footage of Sandra and Adam together in their marital bed. "You spied on me?" Sandra asked, irritated. "Are you seriously upset that I recorded you cheating in our bed?" Harold shot back. Sandra stammered, "I can explain. We can work through this." "Oh, God, no." Harold cut her off. "This wasn't a mistake, Sandra. It was a choice, over and over again. You slept with my brother, had his child, and made me raise her as mine." Rebecca flinched at Harold's cold words. Harold finished his drink, washed the glass, and reflected on how his marriage was going down the drain. As he put on his jacket and headed for the door, Sandra yelled, "Where are you going? We need to talk. This is a family." Harold scoffed. "What family? Did you not hear what I just said? I'm leaving because I can't stand the sight of either of you." He slammed the door and drove off, needing to escape. At 10 p.m., he didn't want to go to a bar. He wanted to be with a friend. He knew just where to go. Rose was at home with her 2 new German Shepherd puppies, Lady and Gunter. She had always wanted to be a mother, but bad relationships had left her alone. These puppies were now her companions. When she heard her buzzer, she saw Harold on the door camera and let him in. When Harold arrived, he was heartbroken. Without saying a word, he held on to Rose and cried, finally releasing all the pain and anguish he had been holding in. His family's betrayal, the discovery of the affair, and the heartbreak of it all. Rose comforted Harold as she had done years ago, holding him as he cried without any shame. She gently stroked his head and whispered, "It's okay, honey. I'm here." When he finished, Harold shared what had happened. "I feel like a joke, like I've been hit by a car and everyone is laughing, especially the people who were supposed to be my family." Rose, having been through her own heartbreak, understood his pain. "Look at me, Harold," she said softly. Harold looked up, tears in his eyes. "No matter what, I'm here for you." Just like before. Harold managed to smile. "Good seeing you again, partner." Rose smiled back. "Yeah, it is, partner. I have a guest room ready for you. You should get some rest. I doubt your wife will mind, given the situation." Sarcastic, but Harold chuckled. "No, she won't." Before heading to bed, Harold hugged Rose. "Thank you, Rose, for everything." Rose smiled and kissed his cheek. "You do the same for me." "Good night, Harold." "Good night, Rose," Harold replied, as they both went to their rooms, old feelings starting to resurface. The next morning, Harold woke to the smell of bacon and eggs. Entering the living room, he saw Rose cooking, her 2 puppies by her side. "Good morning, handsome. Hope you don't mind Spam, onions, and cheese in your eggs. Got bacon and toast, too," she said warmly. "Sounds perfect. They say hunger is the best spice," Harold replied, grateful his old girlfriend still knew her way around the kitchen. Rose playfully tossed a dish rag at him. "Doubting my skills, sir?" "Not at all, madam," Harold responded, both of them laughing. As they enjoyed breakfast, Rose asked, "What are you going to do now?" Harold thought for a moment. "At first, I thought we could work it out, but after seeing those letters, chats, and videos... No, there's no fixing this. I moved my things to the basement, but eventually, I want them out of my house. Rebecca's 18 now, so she's not my responsibility. I'm planning to sue Adam for child support and alienation of affection, and I have something in mind for my mother, too." Rose nodded, understanding his determination. "I want to be there for you, like we used to be." "You already are, Rose. More than you know," Harold replied, both feeling the tension between them. Harold's phone rang. It was Rebecca. Reluctantly, he answered, "What do you want?" "Dad, I'm sorry about everything. You weren't supposed to find out like this," Rebecca said, her voice shaking. "First of all, I'm not your father, so don't call me that." "And how exactly was I supposed to find out?" Harold responded bitterly. Rebecca hesitated, then asked, "Well, as you know, I want to go to college. How are you going to handle the payments? School is expensive." Harold was stunned by her entitlement. Rose waved her hand in front of his face to snap him out of it. Slowly, Harold responded, "Let me get this straight. After you and your mother show me how unappreciated I am, and reveal that I've been raising another man's child, a child who hates me, you have the nerve to ask me to pay for your college?" Rebecca, unfazed, replied, "Just do it already. You're legally my dad, so you're obligated to help me." "Screw you," Harold snapped. "You're an adult now, and I'm not obligated to do anything. If you want to go to college, ask your real dad to pay for it. Don't ever contact me again." He hung up and blocked her number. Turning to Rose, Harold said, "I need to get things started. I think..." Neither Harold nor Rose could deny the feelings between them. Their eyes met, filled with desire, and soon they were kissing. Genuine, passionate, and full of love. Suddenly, Harold pulled back, stopping the kiss. "Rose, I'm sorry. You're hurting. And I took advantage. I should have..." Harold gently placed a finger on her lips. "You have nothing to apologize for, Rose. It's clear our feelings never really went away, just took a long nap. Rose, I love you. I never stopped." "And I never stopped loving you, Harold. From the day we parted until now," Rose confessed, her voice filled with emotion. Harold brushed her hair aside and wiped away a tear. "But I respect you, Rose, and my vows. I need to give Sandra the divorce papers first. That happens tonight. If you want us to be together, please respect my wish to stay faithful until this is over. If that's too much, I understand." Rose kissed his cheek. "I've waited over 17 years. I can wait a little longer." They hugged, and for the first time in a while, Harold felt hope. He left, showered, and prepared for Rebecca's birthday party at the hotel. As he dressed, he realized there was no point in dwelling on the past. He could only move forward. When he arrived home, workers were preparing for the party. Oh, great. Rebecca's birthday. Just what I needed, he thought. His phone rang, and seeing the caller ID, Harold sneered. He thought about ignoring it, but remembered his phone was tapped for evidence. "You piece of crap! What have you done?" Adam's voice screamed through the phone. Harold played dumb. Hello, Adam, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I got called into HR today. OSHA and the Department of Labor were there with my supervisor. 3 women filed complaints against me, and this time it stuck. I'm suspended. This isn't supposed to happen, Adam ranted. Harold's voice turned cold. If by fun, you mean maltreating them, then this is exactly what should happen. Adam paused, realizing he had revealed too much. His tone became venomous. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm your brother, Adam. I'm the guy whose wife you screwed. How could you do that to me? You've hated me my whole life. Why? Adam continued coldly. You were born. Dad loved you even though you weren't his. That time with him should have been mine. You were perfect, good grades, friends. I was just your little brother. So when I had the chance to take Sandra, I did. I made her feel alive while you were focused on your own life. We had Zex while you were in boot camp, and I laughed at turning you into a loser. His voice filled with arrogance. Adam added, I don't know how you messed with my job, but if I get fired, I'll liquidate you. Understand? Harold smiled, grateful for the recorded evidence. I hear you loud and clear, Adam. Adam tried to regain control. Good. Now you'll go to the party with Sandra and Rebecca. You'll play the happy husband and keep up appearances. Do we understand each other? Crystal, Harold replied calmly. Adam hung up, thinking he'd intimidated his brother. But Harold laughed, knowing Adam had just handed him enough evidence to press serious charges, including parental fraud and alienation of affection. Initially, Harold planned to skip the party, but now he saw an opportunity. Time to show the world my loving and caring family, he thought with a smile. Harold arrived at the hotel in his freshly polished Camaro, handing the keys to a valet who admired the car. Harold joked, Careful with the drool, I just had it waxed. The valet, embarrassed, started to apologize, but Harold gave him a $100 tip. It is a nice car. Thanks for appreciating it. Can you park it close to the exit? I don't think I'll be staying long. The young valet smiled and agreed to Harold's request. Inside, Harold found the ballroom to be extravagant, with a beautiful sculpture in the center and a bar nearby. Waiters served drinks to those over 21, identified by purple bracelets, while a DJ played music for the dancing crowd. Harold had to admit it was an impressive setup. He soon spotted his lawyer, Charles, and his PI, Marcus. Marcus blended in by wearing maintenance clothes, while Charles was dressed in a sharp suit. Harold briefed them on the situation and instructed them to set up the equipment. If anyone asks, you're just part of the staff, he said. Guests began to arrive, including Sandra, Rebecca, and his mother, Janet. Janet, always vain, looked as polished as ever, but her character remained rotten. When she saw Harold, she sneered, So, you finally came to your senses and showed up for Rebecca's special day. At least you did something right. Harold ignored her and mingled with the other guests, which included Rebecca's friends, her boyfriend, relatives, and even his grandfather. His grandfather, though in his 80s, still commanded respect, especially from Janet, who was on her best behavior around him. The party went smoothly with dancing, drinks, and lively conversation. When it was time for birthday speeches, Adam arrived just in time, smirking at Harold as he passed by. Sandra avoided Harold, clearly ashamed, while his mother looked at him with disdain, as usual. As Rebecca began her speech, she glanced at Harold with clear disdain. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Applause followed, and Harold took a sip of his drink. Marcus leaned in and whispered, Everything's ready. Nice move making this an 18 and up party. Harold smiled. Yeah, it was, Rebecca continued, her smile turning cruel. Family isn't just about blood. My own dad, for example, doesn't want to support my dream of becoming a nurse. He's punishing me for his argument with my mom. What kind of father does that? The mood turned tense as judgmental stares focused on Harold. But Harold remained calm. Then he began to clap slowly as he walked to the center of the room. Brilliant! My daughter, everyone? That's rich, he said sarcastically. The room fell silent, all eyes on Harold. He began, I traveled 1,500 miles to see my daughter born. From that moment, I vowed there was nothing I wouldn't do for her. She was my heart, my sun, and my moon. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Harold then revealed a remote and played a projector, displaying messages that exposed Rebecca's knowledge that Harold wasn't her father, her manipulation, and her role in hiding her mother's affair with Adam. The screen showed how she called Adam daddy and mocked Harold behind his back. Rebecca was horrified. And now, Harold continued, let's talk about my wife. I loved her since high school, gave her everything. But while I was serving our country, she was having an affair with my brother. Harold played a video showing his wife and brother having sex in their marital bed, with his brother mocking him during the act. He also displayed chat logs and videos revealing their plans to drain his funds and kick him out of his own home through divorce. They openly professed their love for each other, treating Harold as a mere inconvenience. Sandra screamed in shock and shame when she saw the evidence. Harold walked over to her and handed her a vanilla envelope. "I want a divorce, Sandra," he said coldly. "I sold the house too. It's in my name. And since we're in an at-fault state, you have no say. The locks have been changed, and you have until the end of the week to collect your things. I'm being more generous than you deserve. You can keep your $401k and we'll split the marital assets. I sold the house for $2,000, so you have some money for groceries and gas. I want nothing to do with a place filled with lies, and I want nothing to do with you. What you did was selfish and cruel. You let my brother screw you and had me raise his daughter, who took joy in being cruel to me." Harold's voice hardened. "If you fight me, I'll destroy you with the evidence I've shown, and more that I haven't. You'll lose everything, and Adam will have to sell you off to make rent. Maybe your daughter can wash dishes while you sell yourself to get by. You promiscuous." Sandra fled the ballroom in embarrassment, with her daughter following. Harold continued to address the stunned crowd. "Now, let's talk about my blood-related family," he said. "Rebecca was right. Blood doesn't make you family. Meet my brother Adam. Besides being a wife-stealing dirtbag, let's start from the beginning. I'm a year older than Adam. I was raised by a man named Trevor Jacobs." Photos of Trevor filled the screen. "He's the only one in my family who truly loved me. My biological father left before I was born. Trevor raised me as his own, and I'm who I am today because of him. Then Adam was born. I don't know why he hated me so much or why he made me a betrayed by having me raise his child, but I let him explain." Harold then played the recording of his earlier conversation with Adam, revealing Adam's jealousy, his wish for Harold's end of life, and his belief that Harold had no right to their father's love or money. Adam even threatened to eliminate Harold. Harold turned to his brother. "You don't need to worry about being my brother anymore because, as far as I'm concerned, you were dead to me the moment I found out you were screwing my wife." Adam lunged at Harold, but Harold ducked and knocked him with a strong punch to the ribs, causing Adam to collapse. Marcus, acting as security, quickly handcuffed Adam. "You're being detained until the police arrive, for both your safety and mine," Marcus said. Adam groaned in pain, struggling to stay conscious. Harold handed him an envelope. "You've been served, prick." Adam glared at Harold with pure hatred as Harold walked back to the center of the room. He then turned his attention to his mother. "And now, my mother. Let's just call her Janet because, boy, does she hate me. She knew about the affair and was perfectly fine with me being made a betrayed by her favorite son." He displayed images of Janet's chats and videos openly supporting Adam and Sandra's affair, along with conversations where she and Rebecca criticized Harold. The crowd's disdain for the family grew even stronger, but Harold wasn't done. He pulled out a brown leather diary. Janet's face went pale. "Mom kept a diary since I was born. According to her, my father was a selfish dirtbag who ran when he found out she was pregnant. But that's not entirely true," Harold continued. "I did some digging and found out my real father was Alex Thompson. Alex and Janet met in high school, and during their senior year, Janet decided she wanted kids. Alex, however, made it clear he wasn't ready and always insisted on using protection, even asking Janet to be on the pill. But Janet lied, telling Alex she was on the pill because he trusted her. They were planning to get married until she got pregnant. Janet was thrilled, thinking she'd finally have her happy family. But Alex's powerful parents didn't like the idea of their son being trapped. They hired top lawyers to tell her she could keep the baby, but she'd be raising it alone." Harold paused, observing the crowd's reaction, then continued. "Alex signed away his parental rights, shattering Janet's dream of a perfect family. From that moment, she truly hated me even before I was born. She wanted to get rid of me, but my wealthy grandfather stepped in and threatened to disinherit her. So she had me, though she didn't even want to hold me after I was born. And here's the kicker. Janet had a neighborhood friend who would visit when Dad wasn't home. Yes, she cheated on him." Harold continued. "One day I saw her friend, let's call him Rusty. Rusty liked hanging out with me, particularly when Mom or Dad wasn't in the room. Rusty one day came into my room when I was asleep. Anyway, I woke up to see Rusty with his hand touching me in ways no should be touched. The crowd gasped, but Harold continued, his voice steady. When I told my mom about it, she slapped me and threatened to send me away where no one, not even Trevor, could find me. She accused me of lying. I always thought mothers were supposed to protect their kids, but I got the opposite. People in the audience began to cry, and Harold shed a few tears himself. Now, you're probably wondering, why should we believe you? Watch the screen. The screen showed videos and recordings backing up Harold's story, his father's account, Janet's own words expressing her regret and hatred, and diary pages confirming everything. The crowd grew somber. Some cried for what Harold had endured, while others looked on with disdain for his family. Harold approached his mother. I had no choice in being born, and the only real family I had wasn't even related by blood. But I want you out of my life, for good. No more calls, no more texts. And when you take your last breath, I want you to know you'll die alone. If you weren't so full of hate, you could have been surrounded by love and people who cared. But now, the only ones around will be those waiting to take your body away. Janet was speechless. Harold placed the microphone on its stand and addressed the crowd one last time. Thanks for coming, everyone. Have a good night. As the police arrived to take Adam away, Harold turned to Sandra and Rebecca. We have nothing left to discuss. We are no longer family in any sense of the word. If you have any questions, talk to my lawyer. I want you both out of my house and take that mother-in-law of yours with you. Janet, regaining her composure, tried to insult him. You sorry excuse for a man. The moment you walk out of here, you're no son of mine. Harold looked at her with a cold expression and said, I'll gladly take that role. Then he turned and flipped her off. Harold thanked Marcus with a hug and handshake. Thanks for everything. Marcus smiled. If I could get some PTO out of this, I'd appreciate it. Harold grinned. Consider your 2 weeks vacation approved. Just let us know when you want to use it. Marcus nodded, then asked, Are you going to be all right? Something tells me you don't want to be around here. Do you have somewhere to go? Harold nodded. Yeah, I've got a place. Later that night, Rose awoke to the buzz of her apartment door. Seeing it was Harold, she let him in. Without a word, they embraced and kissed with a passion they hadn't felt in years. They made love for the rest of the night. The next morning, Harold woke up with Rose lying on his chest. When she woke, she smiled and kissed him. Good morning, sleepyhead. Good morning, beautiful, Harold replied. As she lay on his chest, Rose asked, How did last night go? Harold sighed. It felt like watching a beautiful lie die. But for once, the truth is actually better than the lie could ever be. Rose kissed him gently. I love you, Harold. I never want to lose you again. I'll fight to keep that from happening. Harold held her close. I feel the same way, but I have a bit of a problem. Rose looked concerned. What is it? Harold sighed. I sold my house and found myself homeless. Could I stay here for a while? It won't be long, I promise. I just need to... Before he could finish, she kissed him repeatedly. Stay as long as you want. You don't even have to ask. They laughed together, their passion for each other growing as they spent the day making love. As the week went by, Harold started his new life. He moved his belongings from the house the next day, leaving Sandra's and Rebecca's things in a storage container in front of the house. One day, on his way back to Rose's from work, Harold got a call from Charles. Harold, it's Sandra. She says she'll sign whatever you want, no questions asked, but you must talk to her. Harold thought it over. He didn't really need Sandra's cooperation. He could crush her in the divorce, and his threats weren't empty. But he realized he just wanted her out of his life completely. He wanted to start fresh with Rose, the love he thought he'd lost long ago. Still in his 30s, he wanted to spend that time with someone who loved and respected him, and he wanted to do it right. Okay, Charles, let me know when and where to meet her. The next day, Harold met with Charles in his office. Sandra and her lawyer were ready to sign the papers. Despite her lawyer's objections, she agreed to sign if she could speak to Harold first. Once the lawyers left the room, Sandra broke the silence after 2 minutes. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I'm truly sorry. You may not believe it, and I don't blame you. But I do love you. I can't justify what I did to you or how I let Rebecca treat you. Harold looked at her. Was it something I did or didn't do? Sandra almost shouted, No, God, no, Harold. This is all on me. She then called the lawyers back in and signed the papers, tears in her eyes. She told Harold that Rebecca would stay with her and apologized one last time before walking out of his life for good. 3 months later, Harold received a call from an unknown number. It was a lawyer asking to meet. They met at Charles's office. Hello, Mr. Jacobs. Thank you for meeting with me. I'm here to inform you that your grandfather, Michael Williams, has disinherited your mother. Based on the events of that night, He instructed me to deliver this message as he is unable to speak due to his condition. The lawyer paused, then read from a letter. My dear grandson, I'm so sorry I didn't protect you from what you went through. I was angry with your mother, but I had no idea you suffered so much. She kept me from you, and that stopped us from building a stronger bond. I'm leaving you my trust of $500 million. Use it wisely to build rather than destroy. Your mother was once entitled to it, but given recent events, I'm giving you her share as well. I wish we could have gone fishing one last time. Those moments were some of the best of my life, and I thank you for them. I was proud of you the day you wore the same uniform as I did, and the day you provided for what you believed was your family. May this gift help you start a new chapter with a real family. I love you, Harold Jacobson, and I'm proud of the man you've become. Sincerely, old man. Harold shed tears, not because of the money, but because someone other than Trevor, a blood relative, truly loved him. He had thought his grandfather stopped seeing him because he didn't care, but it was his mother who kept them apart. He shared the news with Rose, who was happy for him, but then she surprised him. We're getting you a prenup as soon as possible, she said, if we get married. Harold was about to respond, but she held up her hand. Harold, I love you, and I know you love me, but you deserve someone trustworthy and loyal. Let me do this to show you I'm in love with my soulmate, not his wallet. Harold smiled. Okay, beautiful, but I picked the dinner on our honeymoon. Rose kissed him. Deal. As time passed, much changed. Harold's former family was shunned by everyone. People were disgusted by how they treated him and wanted nothing to do with them. Adam lost his job due to the sexual maltreatment charges and the scandals surrounding his company, along with the alienation of affection lawsuit and back pay for child support. He ended up living in a trailer on the outskirts of the city. Sandra faced charges of parental fraud and could have gone to jail, but Harold spoke on her behalf, his last act of kindness toward her. She was placed on probation and was required to undergo mandatory DNA testing if she became pregnant again. With her funds depleted by court costs and legal fees, she had no choice but to move in with Adam. Rebecca was never the same. After the party, her friends abandoned her, unable to believe they had befriended someone so cruel. When she realized her biological father didn't love her and had only used her to hurt Harold, she was crushed. After years of mistreating the man who raised her as his own, she was left devastated. Unable to afford college, she became a dishwasher at the same hotel where her birthday party had been held. She tried to ask Harold for forgiveness, but he refused to have anything to do with her. Janet was shattered after Harold's confrontation at the party. No one in the family spoke to her again. After Harold left, her father slapped her and disowned her for what she did to Harold. For someone like Janet, who valued image above all, this was the ultimate blow. She suffered a heart attack in a hotel room, and, as Harold had predicted, the only ones present at her funeral were the priest and the gravedigger, 7 months later. A very pregnant and radiant Rose walked down the aisle at a small, outdoor wedding, surrounded by spring leaves and a gentle breeze. Her white dress with floral details perfectly complemented the natural setting. Charles served as the best man, Marcus was a groomsman, and Linda, Marcus's wife, was a bridesmaid. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was exactly what Rose and Harold wanted, beautiful and heartfelt. Months later, Harold welcomed the birth of his twins, Jack and Sally. Jack had Harold's nose, and Sally had his eyes. Although Rose insisted on DNA testing, Harold already knew they were his. Overwhelmed with emotion, he embraced his wife and children, saying, "My family, I love you so much. Thank you for being in my life." Rose hugged them all and replied, "Thank you for being you, baby. We love you too with all our hearts. I'll remind you of that as long as I live." 1 year later, Harold sat on a bench overlooking their large backyard, watching Rose play with their dog Gunter while Lady lay beside him with Jack and Sally. Their smiles filled him with warmth. Rose returned to him and shared a loving kiss. With their combined efforts, the couple expanded their business by opening 3 more stores in the city while keeping the original one. They rented out their old apartment to new employees at a discounted rate. Harold's success in the stock market led him to become the owner of his company, with Marcus as the national director, overseeing more sites across the country. As Harold admired his beautiful wife in her red and black sundress, he thought, "I'm the luckiest man on earth."